welcome back to the Crash Course Podcast. My name is Craig Crash Collins, joined as always by Brandon Scott, otherwise known as B. Scott. It is finally time to fill out our NCAA Tournament bracket. Selection Sunday has come and gone, and it is finally time, for the first time in 2 years, to fill out our NCAA Tournament brackets. And that's what today's podcast is going to be about. We're going to be filling out the brackets. We're going to be talking a lot of college basketball. B. Scott, I'm really excited.
Yeah, I'm excited too. It's a busy week, but let's get it going.
Yeah, first though, a little bit of news that we want to talk about. We talked about it a little bit off the air before we went live tonight, and of course, you know, kind of the big story is of course the firing of Archie Miller at IU. He spent 4 seasons with the Hoosiers, did not make any NCAA tournaments, and finished this past year 12-15. And doesn't come as too much of a surprise as far as the results, standpoint. I know some people didn't think it was going to really happen this year. But I mean, it was basically, the writing on the wall was there. And so no surprise that it finally happens.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm a little bit surprised that it happened this year just because of budgeting within the pandemic and everything, and his buyout being so much higher this year than it will be at the end of next season. I mean, it's almost like it's more than cut in half at the end of next season, but apparently they had some boosters pony up and help with the buyout, which makes you wonder if it was Mark Cuban or not, especially with one of the names that is floating around out there for a potential candidate for IU. Does the NBA allow boosters of college programs that are owners or have some kind of heavy stake in an NBA team to help provide money to pull a rival coach away in the NBA to send them back to college? Is that frowned upon? Or
I think it might be. There's got to be some rule against that. Who knows though? Tampering, yeah, something like that.
Let's just throw this out there. We are referring to Brad Stevens, and that has already been nixed completely by Brad Stevens. And apparently IU says they have an agreement with their new head coach, and it's only a matter of time before they announce it. Well, Brad Stevens is in the middle of an NBA season.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, and I've already felt a little bit of the brunt of this on Twitter, which I posted a meme over at Crash Course FM on Twitter, where it's, the handshake meme of Michigan football and IU basketball shaking hands, and it's about the fact that they're both programs are living in the 70s and 80s, and both seem to still think that they're super relevant.
Well, heck, even the 90s. I mean, look, Michigan won the national championship back, it wasn't like 97?
Yeah, 97. Well, but the 70s and 80s were the heyday, like when they were, national powers year in and year out. Whereas, obviously even in the 90s, I mean, Michigan was starting to fade, IU was starting to fade. So, I mean, it's just and I've seen IU fans throw out Brad Stevens. They've thrown out Steve Alford, which I've seen Alford's, not likely in consideration. I've heard there's big names that get thrown out, and
Steve Alford's always going to get thrown out.
Yeah,
there, but
that's
let's
true.
Just be honest, IU will never hire Steve Alford.
And then I've heard John Beilein, and it's just, and the thing is, it's like, somebody said that they're the top head coach on the market. IU is not a top head coach destination anymore.
They're not. They are not Duke. They are not Kentucky. They are not North Carolina. They're not Kansas. They are not that program anymore. They are the bottom of the bottom barrel of the Big Ten right now.
Yeah,
plain and simple. I mean, look, they haven't made the NCAA tournament in 5 years. 5 years. Purdue's made it 6 consecutive years, and that's the 7th longest streak in the NCAA active
for a program that always shouts banners. They haven't obviously haven't won a national championship since 1987, but also they haven't been to the Final Four since 2002. Like, it's been 19 years. Like, if you voted in the last election, there's a chance that you may not have seen the last IU trip to the Final Four.
The last election was your first election to vote in.
Yeah, that's what
I voted in the last.
Well,
election.
Okay, yeah.
No, I voted in the last election, and I'm still not old enough
True.
Have seen it, and I mean,
An
I was
IU
born in
national
87.
championship. Yeah.
I was born in '87, but just after it.
Right.
So, I mean, it's the
And
banners are getting dusty.
let's be clear. You are old too, so I mean,
And I'm old.
no, but like, yeah, it's just it's not a premier destination anymore. They're not relevant. And I mean, and that's the thing. Until IU kind of realizes that, like, hey, we need to get a try to find a guy who has done it before, has a little bit of a track record, but also, I mean, also is because like we were talking about the other names that are getting thrown out there. Drew the last Scott Drew. I can't. Yeah. I was like, if you I almost tweeted this earlier. If you've got anything of substance at a Power 5 or like high end mid major school, why the heck would you leave it to come to IU? Where if you don't win a national championship in 4 years, you're going to be forced out. Brad, I mean, if you have the credentials, if Bobby Knight were available today to be hired as a head coach for Indiana, he wouldn't be hired because he didn't go to Indiana and he's not as hot. He wouldn't have been.
I don't think that really matters to them as much anymore.
Well,
apparently, I mean, they want an Indiana guy. Okay, well, Dane Fife is sitting.
Yeah, Dane Fife,
State, but he's been there for the past 11 years, so apparently he's not good enough or anything.
I was gonna say Dane Fife has been a name that I've heard circulated a little bit, and that's the only hire that I was like, okay, fine, roll your eyes. If it's an Indiana guy, fine, there's your guy. He's been under coaches, so that kind of thing. So that would be a smart hire, but like,
it would be.
But I mean, it's just
ultimately that's the kind of hire Indiana's going to end up with.
Yeah.
Because like I was telling you off air, right now what IU does is takes a bunch of big names, throws them up on a wall, and just to see what sticks, if they can get any of that. Well, guess what? They're all turning them down left and right.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we're going to get Chris Beard from Texas Tech. Really?
How?
You really think you're going to get Chris Beard? No. Well, Scott Drew, he wants to come back to the state of Indiana. Why? Right. He's got one of the best recruiting classes coming in Baylor.
And they just had a season where they only lost 2 games in the regular season.
They are a number 1 seed and a contention for a national championship. And let's be honest, also, Baylor is also one of those schools that is potentially dirty, and it's with Scott Drew. So does IU really want that magnifying glass moved over to them, especially being involved with Adidas still? I mean, like I said off air, it's what it is. What IU needs to do first is figure out who they want to be, not who they were, and try to continue to live off of that. They need to find a culture and something to be known for now. Like, I know I'm a Purdue fan and whatever, but no, take that aside. But look at the example of Purdue with Matt Painter. He built a culture, and now he's finally getting that program around it. It took time. Not everybody's going to get the baby boilers. Let's just be honest. You're just not going to find that every year. Even he didn't. But he built a culture. Defense lives here. Big Man University. I mean, come on. It's just what they are known for. What is IU known for right now? Currently known for? Yes, you have the banners, but they're old and dusty. What are you known for now? What is the culture that you can present to a kid, to his parents, as a coach, other than living in the past? And that's what they need to figure out. And then they need to go out and find that coach that fits that culture that they want, or that can help them build that culture that they want. Is it going to be a big name? Probably not, because guess what? You aren't big name territory anymore. Now, is it potentially a really good up-and-comer? Yeah. That's what you're most likely going to need to find. You don't need to go find the flash in the pan guy like you did with Archie. Because, well, honestly, I feel like Archie ended up ultimately being a panic hire because they weren't getting the big names that they really were after. I think that same thing could happen this time as well. They're not going to get the big names that they're after, and they're going to end up panic hiring. Now, I've also heard, we've mentioned this one too, Rick Pitino. It would be a good hire. It would be. But much like some of the other names, I don't know why Rick Pitino would take the job. One, a lot of times where Rick Pitino goes, scandal seems to follow. It never lands directly solely on him, but it's pretty darn close. And he's just coming from Louisville. That is like the center of the Adidas scandal. Do you really want to? If I'm Rick Pitino, if I really had nothing to do with that Adidas scandal, do I really want to get myself that close and involved with Adidas again? I don't know if Iona's with Adidas. I don't. And at the same time, like we mentioned, like he's getting older, and at Iona, there's not a whole lot of expectations. Win the conference championship, make the NCAA tournament. Well, Iona does that on a regular basis anyways. So just keep the status quo, maybe get an upset here or there, and we're all good. I mean, it's kind of a cush job for this point in his career. Do you really want to leave someplace that could just be comfortable and allow you to really just do basketball for a program that needs to be rebuilt, needs to be founded essentially, and has truly, 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 truly high expectations? Is that really what you want? Same thing goes for John Beilein. Everybody's like, well, they're going to get John Beilein. He's an ultimate. He's a great fit. He's 65 years old. He left Michigan where he was getting just about any player that he wanted. He was winning Big Ten championships, going to the national title game. He had everything going on there. He left Michigan for the NBA because he was tired of recruiting. Well, he didn't really have to recruit that hard at Michigan. But at IU, he's going to have to recruit hard again because he's also going to be contending against Matt Painter. He doesn't have any big time successes at Indiana to recruit on, and he has to build a culture there. Does somebody at the age of 65 really want to have that kind of rebuild project on their lap? I mean, yeah, he may be a short-term solution, but IU really needs to be looking long-term here. So it's really kind of interesting to see where this could potentially go. If they get Rick Pitino, great. I think that's a great hire. Some question marks there. You're not getting Scott Drew. You're not getting Chris Beard. You're not getting Brad Stevens, especially when Brad Stevens can go any NBA job that he wants if he wants to leave the Celtics. And also if he can go get any college job he wanted if he really wanted to. I mean, Duke. If Duke opens up, guess what? IU, you're not getting him. Duke would get him before. You would. But, is it like an Eric Musselman type from Arkansas? Is that a good fit? I think that'd be a great fit. But is it Dane Fife a good fit? Yeah, I think that'd be a great fit. But that's ultimately not the kind of person they're wanting. They want to go out and hire this big name, big splash, and expect him to win a national championship next season.
Yeah.
That's just not going to happen. The expectations do not meet what the product is right now.
Yeah, I completely agree, and we'll see what they end up doing. I'll be interested to see if they kind of go down the road we're kind of expecting them to go on, or if they do get kind of a long-term potential good hire. Before we get into the brackets, we're just getting ready to get our selections going. Before then, let's go ahead and get a word from our friends of the show. The Crash Course Podcast is brought to you by Anchor. Looking to start a podcast but don't know where to start? Look no further than Anchor.fm. Anchor allows you to record and edit your podcast right from your computer or mobile device, and will distribute it to other sites such as Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. On a budget, not only is Anchor completely free of charge, but will allow you to make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. Download the free Anchor app or go to Anchor.fm to get started. Anchor, it's everything you need in a podcast in one place.
Are you tired of your same old lunch hour of sitting and scrolling through your apps on your smartphone? Have you thought about playing a board game with your coworkers? Eat Lunch and Board Game is a podcast dedicated to telling you about board games that are great for lunchtime fun and some that are probably better saved for after work hours. I've been playing games at my office for over 4 years now, where I have made new friends and business connections that have been very useful. Board games build bridges.
All right, it is finally that time. It is time to get into our brackets. Really excited to finally get into it. We're going to start with the West, so top left of the bracket. We're going to be going down through the East, into the South, into the Midwest, and then, of course, our Final Four. And we'll get to, of course, all those selections as well. Really excited to finally get back to some NCAA basketball, NCAA tournament play here. And let's go ahead and get it going here. B. Scott, I'll give you my first round, then you go, and we'll go back and forth that way. So first matchup on the board, Gonzaga versus the winner of Norfolk State and Appalachian State. Obviously, we're not going to see any UMBC craziness this time around. I'm going with the Zags, the WCC champs. Then we've got the 8-9 Oklahoma versus Missouri. I feel like I saw Missouri, or not Missouri, I feel like I saw Oklahoma, like, on my ESPN alerts, like, every single week, with some sort of craziness going on in the Big 12. Missouri has had some surprising wins. They beat Illinois, they've beat Alabama, they've beat Arkansas, they've beat Tennessee. I mean, they've beat some pretty solid teams. They're 4-2 against the top 25. And I just don't trust the Big 12 come tournament time. Now, I mean, sometimes I've been wrong on that, but I'm going to go ahead. These 8-9 matchups are a toss-up, so I'm going to go ahead and go with Missouri. Then we've got the 5-12 Creighton versus UCSB. Creighton just got their doors blown off by Georgetown in the Big East Championship game. So they're going to come out with a little bit of a vengeance here. They're going to come out strong and get the win there. Then we got Virginia versus Ohio, which is interesting because Virginia right now is in quarantine. So not sure if we're going to see Virginia. We may see Louisville, who is the first team, that is a replacement team. Regardless, though, Virginia, going with Virginia, and even I think I would pick this if it was Louisville. I'm going to go with the 4 seed here. No upset for Ohio, as much as I would like to. As much as I would love to see some action here, I'm going to go with Virginia. Then we've got USC versus the winner of Wichita and Drake. USC has had a strong season. They did, beat BYU by 26, Oregon by 14. They've got some solid wins on the season, and just not knowing who we will see in that matchup, I'm just going to go ahead and pick USC. Kansas versus Eastern Washington. Of course, Kansas out of the Big 12 tournament because of COVID. There's a chance they could get replaced as well. But again, no upset here. We're going with Kansas. So, a lot of chalk so far with the exception of Missouri so far. VCU and Oregon, I'm picking the Ducks. VCU just hasn't been as impressive as I'd like to see them. Oregon, they've got some strong wins on the season. 14-4 in the Pac-12. They play solid defense. They score some solid points on offense. So I'm going with the Ducks. And then Iowa has had an amazing season this year. They're going up in the 2-15 matchup against Grand Canyon. I'm all for upsets and chaos, but you're not seeing a lot of that in the first round. Iowa's just had too good of a season so far, so I have them moving on to the round of 32.
You looking at my bracket or something? I mean, that's exactly how I picked it. Gonzaga is not going to lose in the first round. I do have Missouri winning because Missouri's also looked at as one of those teams that is underseeded and at a 9. Creighton, I think they're going to win. Even if they didn't have something to prove, I think they would still win. I'm going to have Virginia over Ohio or whoever potentially replaces Virginia, however that plays out. Actually, I do have one difference. I do have the winner of Wichita State and Drake beating USC. Wichita State just knows how to turn it on this time of year, and Drake was undefeated at one point this year and right up there. So Drake, don't sleep on the Bulldogs or Drake. I think that's the Bulldogs, right?
Yeah.
But don't sleep on Drake. So I had to go with
the rapper.
Like I told you, I don't have that many upsets, so I kind of went with that one just because USC didn't even win the regular season or the tournament of the Pac-12, and they were up in the top 25 a lot this year. So I don't have the most faith in them. I have Kansas, or if Kansas needs to get a replacement team in there, I have that replacement team winning as well over Eastern Washington, Oregon over VCU, and then Iowa over Grand Canyon. No problems there.
Alrighty, so that means round of 32 for me, Gonzaga versus Missouri. I'm going with the Zags. They've just been very impressive this season. Obviously, undefeated. Creighton and Virginia. I think I'm going to go with Creighton on this one. Virginia versus the top 25 this year has lost 3 of 4. And they've struggled against some, and they've struggled big. I mean, they lost by 21 to Florida State. They lost by 23 to Gonzaga. I mean, it's a 4 and a 5 seed, so it's not like super, upsetty here. But I just like I like what Creighton's doing, and again, I think they've got too much of a vendetta after losing in the Big East Championship to be a first weekend exit. USC, Kansas, as much as, the whole COVID thing, kind of scares me about Kansas, I think I'm going to go with the Jayhawks here to beat USC. And then Iowa versus Oregon. Don't trust the Pac-12. The Pac-12 isn't doing so hot. I can't really in good conscience pick a Pac-12 upset, so you're actually gonna see me pick an upset over. I'm gonna make the later on in the bracket. I'm gonna make a pick against the Pac-12 that, even though on my history of crash kiss of death, I will make this the most lockdown pick of all time. You're gonna be shocked.
All right.
I bet, honestly, I say you're gonna be shocked, but it's probably one that you have to.
Probably. All right. So for me, for this round, I have Gonzaga over Missouri. I mean, we all say we would love to see Gonzaga actually play a tough regular season schedule, but it gets in a tournament and they still prove it here as of late. So, I mean, they're a lock for the Sweet 16, I feel like. So when I read out this bracket, I do have Virginia in it, because you can't, you got to pick with who's there. You don't know if they're going to be out and there's going to need to be replacement. Yeah. So I do have Virginia over Creighton, mostly because Virginia's defense, the Tony Bennett defense, and the slow pace of the game that he uses can really probably throw Creighton off. So I have Virginia moving on to the Sweet 16. I have Kansas beating the Wichita State Drake winner. Kansas is just too athletic. The road ends there for the Cinderella. And then Iowa over Oregon. Oregon prides themselves on playing positionless basketball, whereas Iowa has true positions with their players. Luka Garza is just going to have a huge, huge game against Oregon. He's going to be way too much to handle for them. So they move on to the Sweet 16.
All right, so first Sweet 16 matchup for me, it's Gonzaga versus Creighton. It's a toss-up for me. I'm going with Gonzaga, though, as much as I'd like to pick Creighton to move on. And then as far as Kansas and Iowa, this is another toughie for me. I just look at Kansas's resume. I mean, you look at what these teams are very similar. I mean, obviously, Iowa's in the top 5 in BPI. Iowa's 8-5 against the top 25. Kansas is 8-6. But you look at kind of the resume for Iowa. They lost by 11 to Gonzaga. They lost by 22 to Michigan. They've lost twice to Illinois. It seems like in a lot of situations where they've gone up against tough teams, they've kind of not been able to carry their weight at times this season. So it's kind of a toss-up where you've got two teams that historically you aren't really able to trust as much. Like Kansas, you don't like to trust, and Iowa, you don't like to trust. And so in this instance, I guess I got to go with Kansas here. I think that they're going to move on. So I've got Kansas for the West Final. I've got Gonzaga and Kansas.
Yeah, I have Gonzaga beating Virginia. I think eventually, even if Virginia is able to play, the effects of having a few players out with COVID, or I don't know if it's one player or two, how many players are on reserve or what, but there is going to be some effects there. Gonzaga's just good. They're good. And I have them moving on to the Elite Eight. Kansas and Iowa is going to be a very intriguing matchup because it's what Kansas team shows up. Is it and what Iowa team shows up? Is it the Iowa team that just looked unbeatable earlier in the season? Or is it the Iowa of late that's, beatable? Or is it the Kansas that looked like they weren't going to make the tournament early on in the season? Or the Kansas that's made this resurgence here late? Ultimately, I do have Kansas prevailing just because I think the athleticism is going to prevail again there over Iowa. Iowa is more of a drudge it, beat them down type team where Kansas moves the ball a lot quicker. So I got Kansas and Gonzaga in my Elite Eight.
All right, so in the Elite Eight, we both have Gonzaga and Kansas, and I think we might have the same team moving on. This is a matchup that we saw play out earlier in the season, which the Zags won by 10. I think Gonzaga is just the better team. than Kansas, the more consistent team, the more prolific team, whatever, superlative adjective you want to throw out there. Gonzaga's just the better team. So I'm going to go with the Zags. The Zags are my first Final Four team.
Yep. I have the Zags moving on for the exact same reason. They've been good they've been the best from start to finish. Yeah, they have a lot. Do they have a loss? Yeah, they got a loss. Pretty sure.
Gonzaga?
Yeah.
No, they're unbeaten.
Unbeaten? Okay. Yeah, I mean, they're the best for a reason. I mean, yeah, they don't play the toughest schedule, but you look at their non-conference, they gave themselves some challenges in the non-conference, and they prevailed from that. So this team is a very, very good team. And Kansas has questions with them, and I don't think that ultimately they're going to be able to overcome Gonzaga.
All right, so moving on to the East. Number 1, Michigan versus the 16 seed. Michigan, obviously no questions asked. They move on. LSU versus Saint Bonaventure. I'm going to go with LSU. Saint Bonaventure hasn't played a top 25 team all season, so they really haven't.
I have that too, but I really wanted to make that one just because I was like, what else?
Yeah, I mean,
it's an 8-9. It's a low-hanging fruit.
Right. So I built this up, to be a big, the most lockdown pick that I've ever made, on the Crash Course podcast. Now, to give you a little bit of a history of the Crash Kiss of Death, kind of where the origin story, or where it really took off, was back, I think it was, probably 2013, I think is what it was, because it was Michigan, the year that Michigan went to the national championship and played Louisville. See, we've come full circle. We're back to Louisville. So I had picked.
We don't speak of that national championship.
That
national championship does not exist.
It didn't happen. So Michigan. I picked Michigan to win the Big Ten that year, and I think that they lost. They lost in the first round, and so it was
Ohio State that
right. So what I did was I said, you know what? I'm completely off of Michigan. I had Michigan losing in the first round that year, and Michigan ends up going on to almost win the whole thing, and so that is where the Crash Kiss of Death kind of really took off. So I bring you now to a similar scenario. I picked Colorado to win the Pac-12 championship game. And they made it there, but they lost to Oregon State. And so now I'm completely off of Colorado, and I'm completely on the bandwagon of Georgetown. So I think Georgetown is the most locked down 5-12 upset I think you could have on the bracket. Georgetown coming off a fantastic win over Creighton in the Big East Championship game. The 8th seed in the Big East rallies, comes through, and takes out Big Bad Creighton, a team that I have in the Sweet 16. I'm going with the 5-12. Georgetown beats Colorado. Mark it down. Write it in Sharpie. That's how confident I am in that pick, and we'll probably come back to, let's see, this is 32 minutes, 12 seconds, so that's where I know where to clip it when Colorado makes their Final Four run. Florida State...
Colorado make the Final Four run, this whole bracket, everybody's bracket out the window.
That is very accurate. Florida State versus UNC Greensboro. Florida State... especially, coming off of a loss, in the ACC championship game, they're going to be looking to prove some stuff, because they were one of the best. That was basically door wide open after Virginia was out to win it, and they were unable to. BYU versus the winner of Michigan State and UCLA. I'm going a little risky here because I'm banking on Michigan State winning, and I think that they will. And against BYU, I'm going to go with Michigan State to win that game. So I'm going to go with the upset. Who I imagine is going to be Michigan State. They're going to beat BYU as another 11 over a 6 upset. Texas over Abilene Christian. Texas riding high after the Big 12 championship game. So I'm going to go with Texas there. UConn and Maryland, kind of a toss-up. You've got a UConn team that, really, they've gone up against top 25 teams, a handful of times this season. They've got beat by Creighton 3 times. They lost to Villanova. They've not really been able to, get that big win on the season. But On the other side, you have Maryland, who's a little closer to 500, but they've been battle tested. They've been able to beat Illinois earlier in the season. They've been able to get a win over Purdue and Wisconsin and Rutgers on the year. So I'm going to go with Maryland to get the win there over UConn, and then Alabama over our boy Rick Pitino. I'm going to go with the Crimson Tide. Roll Tide, and it's not football season, so I feel a little bit better saying it. Alabama moving on to the round of 32.
Jeez, this is a boring show because we got the same. Michigan advances over the 16th seed. Come on. I have LSU over Saint Bonaventure. I mean, LSU had, the ball was in the hoop and spun back out. All I had to do was just continue to drop, and they win the SEC. So that they got that taste in their mouth. I do have Georgetown over Colorado. I think the job Patrick Ewing has done at Georgetown is admirable, and it's only pointing now in the right direction. That's going to be a very tough team in the near future. Florida State over UNC Greensboro. Okay, so this matchup between BYU and potentially Michigan State or UCLA is an interesting one. Michigan State and UCLA are playing in the first four. I have Michigan State winning that game. And it's in Mackey Arena. That's a big reason why I have Michigan State winning that game, just kind of familiarity. I don't know where this actual first round game is going to be played. It's already been decided, I know, but I just don't know. I haven't had the will to look it up. But BYU versus Michigan State is very interesting if it's played at Mackey Arena. Michigan State has familiarity with Mackey Arena, but so does BYU's Mountain West Defensive Player of the Year, their center, Matt Harms, who used to roam the sidelines at Purdue before he transferred to BYU. So that could be just a fun little storyline. Obviously, it's not going to really make much of a difference. I have Michigan State winning that game. Even I think UCLA could win that game as well. I'm not 100% sold on BYU. I have Texas advancing. I do have Maryland over UConn as well. I was able to attend the second half of Michigan versus Maryland in the Big Ten tournament. Yes, the fight between Juwan Howard and Mark Turgeon. I wasn't paying attention, but all of a sudden I looked up and there's a fight going on the court. I'm like, whoa, what's going on? It's a timeout. It's timeout on the floor. And this isn't supposed to happen. But Maryland looked good. I mean, they gave Michigan a good fight, literally. And so I wouldn't be surprised to see Maryland advance on here. And then I have Alabama over Iona. Alabama's just been really good this year, from start to finish.
They really have. Round of 32, I've got Michigan over LSU. LSU, I just don't think they're strong enough to compete with Michigan, what they've got going on. As much as I want to have Georgetown go to the second round, go to the third, Sweet 16. I just can't. Florida State's just been too strong this season. They're too good of a basketball team. So I'm going with Florida State there to get the win. Texas against Michigan State, or who I'm assuming, or I'm thinking is going to be Michigan State most likely. I mean, this is where it gets kind of into the nitty gritty because again, do we trust Texas? How much do we trust Texas? They did beat Kansas twice on the season. They've beaten some strong teams like West Virginia and Texas Tech. So I think Texas does get that win over Michigan State. And then we've got Alabama versus Maryland, and you said it. I mean, Alabama's just been really strong this year. They've been very good. And of course, they rode that all the way to the SEC championship. So I've got Alabama over Maryland. And so that sets up the Sweet 16 of Michigan, Florida, Alabama, and Texas. So literally all chalk so far in the Sweet 16.
Same way. I got Michigan advancing over LSU. They're not as athletic as Alabama was against LSU. They're just more physical. And I think that could be one of the best games in the second round, in my opinion. Michigan and LSU, two very similar style teams. I have Florida State over Georgetown. Yeah, like you said, it would be fun. It'd be a great run to see Georgetown go on, and it could happen. I would like to be wrong on this pick because I don't have Florida State going beyond the Sweet 16, so it doesn't hurt me either way. Michigan State against Texas. I have Texas winning that game. Texas is a good team. They are good, and it's finally coming around for them and Shaka Smart. So I'm happy for them. And then I have Bama over Maryland as well. Alabama's just playing on a different level than normal, and Maryland is they're struggling a little bit, but they're playing much better now than they were earlier this year. It's going to be a good game, but ultimately the athleticism and the high intensity of Alabama will prevail.
All right, into the Sweet 16 here. I'm having a tough time. Of course, you've already filled out your bracket. I like to do mine live on the podcast, and try not to agonize too much and just make those snap decisions. And I'm kind of agonizing over these next two selections because you have the lower seeds in Florida State and Texas that have like some really impressive wins, some really impressive resumes, but but for instance, Texas is that Big 12 school. How much do we trust the Big 12? Alabama's just been so good, but we're just not used to seeing the Crimson Tide, in this kind of a position. They're not, we don't used to, even when they had, I can't think of his name, who was like the first round pick for the Cavaliers a couple of years ago. Even when they had him, like Alabama wasn't that good that year. They were good, but they weren't as good. They weren't as good as they are now. And then you got Michigan, who they have some. Obviously they're number one seed, but they've gotten some bad losses over the course of the season. So I think ultimately. You know me, I don't like going all chalk. I'm going to have Florida State beating Michigan. I just think that Florida State's a little bit more battle-tested. Florida State's, I think Michigan's got more of a propensity for a letdown because we've seen it so far this season. Losing to Michigan State, losing in the Big Ten tournament. Not saying you can't, like, if you lose, you are automatically not going to do well come tournament time, but just, they have the propensity to have that letdown. And then on the other side, as much as I want to go with Texas, I think I'm going to go with Alabama. They've just been an outstanding team this year, and I think they make it onto the Elite Eight.
So I have Michigan over Florida State. I think Michigan's been embarrassed too many times here late in the season, and they're gonna go on a run again. And then honestly, I think top to bottom, they're just a little bit more talented than Florida State. And then Texas versus Alabama, I got Texas winning this game. I think Alabama's finally going to meet a team that's as athletic as they are. So I got Texas moving on to the Elite Eight to face Michigan.
Okay, so we finally get some differential here. Yeah. I like it. So which means this is automatically going to be different too. See, this is how it all works out. So in the Elite Eight, the East Final, I've got Florida State over Alabama. I just like what the Noles are doing right now. Again, Florida State has only played two top 25 teams this season, but they are 2-0. They have been playing some really great basketball. They've been scoring almost 80 points a game, and Alabama has too. But Alabama this season 1-3 against the top 25. It seems like when they venture outside the SEC, they don't have that great of luck as they do when they're within the SEC. And then I just think Florida State plays in a better conference. They've been better against, the better teams that they've played. So I think Florida State is going to go and play Gonzaga in the Final Four. So
I actually have Michigan. I just feel like Michigan is the tougher team here. Michigan's going to grind it out against Texas and really wear them down. Could be the other way around. I would be, like I said, in some of the other matchups, I would be pleasantly surprised. But I got Michigan advancing on to face Gonzaga in the Final Four.
Alrighty. Before we get to the right side of the bracket, do want to remind you that you can follow us on Twitter at Crash Course FM. You can like us on Facebook, Crash Course Podcast. Go follow us on Twitch if you're listening to the regular podcast on the audio end. Go follow us on Twitch, twitch.tv/3C Media. We've also changed the name of the podcast, or we've also changed the name of the YouTube channel. It's now 3C Media. So go subscribe to the podcast over there, because you'll be getting not only all of our podcasts, podcast video, but you're also going to get the MCT podcast. Both podcasts are doing a selection, tournament special that are going to be released on Tuesday before tournament time. So, really excited to get those out there. The MCT boys have been killing it. And so, you guys have shown a lot of support, and I thank you guys for that support. And then, of course, you can listen on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever podcasts can be heard, you can hear the Crash Course podcast. So, on the other end of things, we've got the South bracket, Baylor against Hartford. I am a moron. When I was looking at the bracket yesterday when it was getting released, I was kind of just following along on the app. I wasn't really like watching the selection show, and I saw Hartford, but I read it as Harvard, and I was like, I thought the Ivy League wasn't playing this season, and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool that they just gave him a bid anyway. It's like, nope, Craig, that's actually just Hartford. Regardless, I've got Baylor.
I can say you make that mistake though when you look at it.
Yeah, there's like similar logos too, right? Or at least there's like an H logo. Yeah.
Yeah, Harvard's is like an H within like a shield. That's the only difference. But red H, and then if you're looking real quick, it looks like it. Yeah, I can see how you get that mistaken.
So we look now on to the 8-9 matchup. North Carolina versus Wisconsin. Wisconsin's the better team as far as like ranking wise. I mean seeding wise, no, but I mean Wisconsin's the better team. As far as BPI goes, both have been kind of lackluster against top 25. Neither team really is a real awesome pick here. But I'm gonna go with UNC here. I think they beat Wisconsin. Villanova versus Winthrop. Villanova has been strong all season. They are the 5 seed after all. 3-1 versus the top 25, in the top 10 in BPI. And so I'm not going with an upset here. Villanova moves on. Purdue and North Texas. I mean, North Texas is an amazing team for a reason. They're obviously going to win here. No, it's Purdue. Purdue getting the win.
That's going to be a very good game.
Yeah,
North Texas has got good size and big guards.
They match up well with
very well. This is one of those games that could be a trap game for Purdue. Let's
Texas,
it's Arkansas Little Rock all over again.
Oh my gosh, no, yeah, that's what just popped into my.
Arkansas Little Rock all over.
That popped into my mind there. All right, so you got Texas Tech versus Utah State. Texas Tech has been a really strong team all year. I mean, I know that I'm saying that for every team, and obviously they're good because they're in the tournament.
True.
I mean,
this year I feel like it's been a different type of year in college basketball, and a lot of teams have been strong, and it's been different teams.
Yeah, well, and like also, I mean, you look at Texas Tech, and they're a 6 seed, but they're in the top 10 in BPI. So, yeah. I mean,
that's just how deep college basketball is this year.
Right. And so I'm going with the Red Raiders there. So again, man, as much as I like chaos and upsets, like there's just not a lot.
Hard to find it this year. It's
right.
hard.
Arkansas versus Toothpaste, Colgate. I'm going with Arkansas here. They were my pick to win the SEC, and I'm not going to do what I did to Colorado for Arkansas.
The SEC was a deep conference this year, deeper than they typically are. So you can't put that on them for losing to Alabama.
Right. Oh yeah, I mean they had lost to Alabama earlier in the season. I just thought, but they were like what? They had won like 11 of 12 down the stretch or something like that.
Yeah,
like
they were a hot team. They were a hot team. It's much like Purdue. Like a lot of people pick Purdue to win the Big Ten tournament because they were a hot team at the time.
Florida versus Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech has been a sneaky strong team this year, especially against the top 25. They have a win over Villanova, a win over Virginia on the season. We just talked about how deep the SEC is, and Florida's a good team, but I'm going to go with Virginia Tech here. Got to pick the upsets when you can. It's not going to be all chalk, and I'm going to go. I'm going with the Hokies there. And then Ohio State, Oral Roberts. I think Ohio State has a little bit of a bad taste in their mouth from what happened. They nothing controversial happened.
No reason to be down on themselves. They won.
Oh,
they played 4 straight days, right?
Right, and then like back-to-back overtime games, in that stretch too.
No. They had a game between.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, I'm just saying that I think they're. I guess the better way to phrase that is they're very hungry going into the tournament after almost winning the whole Big Ten. So I'm going with Ohio State there to move on.
All right, so Baylor moving on easily. I do have UNC over Wisconsin as well. Wisconsin, they started the year off really strong, and then they have really fallen off as the season has progressed. So I think North Carolina gets this one pretty easily. Now, this 5-12 matchup of Villanova and Winthrop is interesting because, like I said last week, Villanova is without two of their best players. They're out with injury. This could be one of those that you'd see that 12-5 upset actually happen. I mean, Villanova's too well coached, in my opinion, to allow that to happen. So I still have Villanova moving on. Purdue and North Texas. North Texas has size, but at guard. Purdue has size at guard as well. I think ultimately this is going to be the Travion Williams and Zach Edey show. And at that size is going to be too much for North Texas to handle. So I got Purdue advancing on. Texas Tech and Utah State. Texas Tech they're good. They're always good. They're always solid. Got Texas Tech moving on. I have Arkansas over Colgate. I do have Florida over Virginia Tech, mostly because I just don't know too much about either one of these teams. And Florida, I mean, the SEC is good this year. And Florida did pretty well in the SEC. So I got Florida beating Virginia Tech. And I do have Ohio State over Oral Roberts. That's a tough one to say.
It is tough. Round of 32, I've got Baylor over North Carolina. I mean, wasn't too high on North Carolina even going into there.
That could be closer than you think.
Really?
I think it could. I think that could be one that surprises some people.
So yeah, I've got Baylor. Although again, Big 12 always just makes me shaky.
I guess if you're gonna have a big upset, it could land there.
Yeah, Villanova and Purdue, and honestly, I'm going with Purdue just because of what you mentioned with not having two of their best players. I think that's going to be kind of the end of the road for Villanova. I think that and Purdue's been hot here at the end of the season. Arkansas.
2 years ago, these two teams met in the second round, and Purdue absolutely blasted them.
Yeah.
In Hartford, Connecticut, right in Villanova's backyard.
True. Arkansas versus Texas Tech. I'm going with Arkansas. Texas Tech this season against the top 25, 3-8. So against those tougher teams, they've struggled, whereas Arkansas has been a little bit more middle of the road. They've got a lot of athleticism. I'm going with Arkansas. And then Ohio State versus Virginia Tech. Again, I think Ohio State's hungry after their deep trip into the Big Ten tournament, and I think they carried that momentum onto the Sweet 16. So again, I feel weird, being kind of the crazy upset, picker that I usually try to be, but I have the 1-4 and the 3-2 again.
So I do have Baylor over UNC, but like I said, that's one to keep an eye on. That could be an interesting game. UNC has talent. They do. They just haven't lived up to their talent this year. Villanova and Purdue. I have Purdue winning that game. Like I said, I feel like Winthrop could beat Villanova, but Purdue will beat Villanova. Purdue's just too deep for Villanova to be able to overcome two key injuries, especially the Colin Gillespie injury. That's a big one. To have one of your top guards be out like that, I mean, unfortunately, that could have been a really good game, but Purdue's going to come out on top. I have Texas Tech actually beating Arkansas. I think Chris Beard knows how to get his teams right. I mean, seriously, 2019, that Texas Tech team was good, but were they national runner-up good all season? No, they weren't. It was the year before when Texas Tech probably should have made that run to the national championship game. So I think Texas Tech, he knows how to get his teams right and push them through. So I got Texas Tech over Arkansas. And then I have Ohio State over Florida. Like you said, Ohio State's hungry. Ohio State's righted the ship. The ship was kind of steering off course there for a while near the end of the regular season, but they've got that ship righted now, and they're looking tough. So I got Ohio State advancing on to take on Texas Tech in the Sweet 16.
All right, so in the Sweet 16, Baylor versus Purdue. I've got Baylor winning this game. I just think this is where the road ends for Purdue. They're a team that they're a team that we said at the beginning of the year their ceiling could be the Sweet 16. So I think, obviously that's not going to be the reason why they lose, but I just think that, I feel, I don't feel super confident picking them to go beyond that. And Baylor, again, they've only lost 2 games on the season. And they've been an amazing basketball team this year. So I'm going with Baylor there. Arkansas versus Ohio State. I'm gonna go with the Buckeyes here. I think, I say that like it's an upset. It's not. It's the 2 over the 3. But at the same time, like I just think Ohio State. You look at what they've been able to do this season. They've got their win over Michigan. They've got their win over Iowa. They've got their win over Illinois. They just played Illinois. A team that's gonna, another, top, seed. Just played them really tough and took them to overtime. So Ohio State, has had those signature games this season where Arkansas really hasn't. So I've got Ohio State advancing, and so in the South Final, I've got Baylor versus Ohio State, 1 versus 2.
So I do have Baylor beating Purdue as well. This is Purdue's Achilles heel in the NCAA tournament. They always seem to get put in a bracket with a super athletic Big 12 team, whether it be Kansas or Texas Tech, or in this situation, Baylor and Texas Tech. But yeah, this Baylor team's way too athletic for a young Purdue team. I mean, Purdue will hang tough for a while, but Baylor is going to push that ball too much for Purdue and ultimately advance. But you know what? Like a lot of Purdue fans are saying, and I'm saying, I've said this all along, Purdue making it to the Sweet 16 is like playing with house money, and if anything beyond the second round is basically gravy. Like you just take it, because this was a team that many didn't even think was going to make the NCAA tournament coming into this season because of how young they were. And, you lose one of your 2 of your better defenders to transfer, and like, okay, how's that going to work out? So yeah, Baylor advancing on. And then I have Texas Tech over Ohio State. I think the athleticism of Texas Tech is going to be too much for Ohio State to handle. Ohio State likes to grind it out with you like most Big Ten teams do. Texas Tech is going to push the ball too much, and ultimately that's going to be too much for Ohio State to handle. And that's exactly what we saw of Ohio State against Illinois. Illinois is a bigger athletic team, more so than Ohio State, very much like Texas Tech. So I think that's going to be a little bit too much for Ohio State to handle. So I have Texas Tech going on to take on Baylor. So I got the 1 and the 6.
There you go. I like it. I'm liking it.
I think I also did a lot of these picks at the same time, because it's kind of like when you're taking a test and you realize like, man, I've picked everything is like, I've had a ton of A's and a ton of C's. One of these has got to be a B. So you pick B because you're like, there's no way there can't be any B's.
Right. I like it. So yeah, in the South Final, I've got Baylor and Ohio State. I kind of agonized over this one a little bit, just because like I want to pick Ohio State to win, because they've been so good all season. But Baylor, I mean, it's just hard to argue with 2 losses. I mean, they've because both
one of the losses though to Texas Tech.
To Texas Tech, yeah, but I mean Ohio State, because I have Ohio State in my Elite Eight. Yeah. You're pre. No, actually, no. Their 2 losses this season are to Kansas and Oklahoma State. Kansas in the regular season, and then Oklahoma State in the in the Big 12 championship, but like in the Big 12 tournament. But like that's the thing though, is that like you look at the resume for Baylor, and it's they beat Illinois by 13. They've beaten Kansas, the other time they played them. They've beaten Texas Tech twice. All these teams that we've talked about how good they are, Baylor has beaten them this season. And so, you put them up against Ohio State, a team that who's got the same amount of wins as Baylor against the top 25, but just hasn't been as good outside of that. As much as I want to pick Ohio State, which as someone who didn't like Ohio State growing up, it's kind of weird for me to say. As much as I want to pick Ohio State here, I just got to go with Baylor. So as much as I don't want to see another 1 seed advance, I'm going to go with Baylor here. I think they're just, they're the stronger of the 2 teams. Too many strengths over Ohio State. So I got Baylor moving on.
Yeah, I got Baylor moving on over Texas Tech as well. I mean, this Baylor team is they're good. I mean, they're very good. And the Big 12 was a lot tougher conference-wise this year than it normally is. So for them to come out of the season with only 2 losses, their non-conference schedule was good as well. So Baylor advances to the Final Four. I mean, Baylor's a Final Four team.
Yeah.
Regardless.
All right, so one more region to go. That, of course, is the Midwest. We start with Illinois and Drexel. Illinois advances there. No explanation needed. Loyola against Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech had that strong run to the ACC championship. Ended up winning the ACC championship this year, and I think they're going to ride that momentum. I've got Georgia Tech moving on over Loyola. Tennessee against Oregon State. Oregon State, had a great run to the Pac-12, championship, but I just don't have a lot of faith. I think they were the fifth or sixth seed in the Pac-12 tournament. So I mean, a middle of the road team in a conference that's not really all that good. I'm gonna go with Tennessee here. Oklahoma State against Liberty. Oklahoma State 9 wins against the top 25 this year. They've had a great season. I've got them moving on. San Diego State versus Syracuse. San Diego State on the season 23-4. They haven't really played. They did beat UCLA by 15. San Diego State did, so that's pretty impressive. Not a lot of signature wins on the docket for Syracuse on the year, so I'm going chalk here as well. I've got San Diego State over Syracuse, West Virginia, and Morehead State, and that's kind of the thing too. I mean, West Virginia has the win over Kansas. They've been strong all year. I'm going to go with West Virginia. I think that's the thing too, is that you look at some of the resumes of some of these mid-major schools, and I think it's because of the lack of a lot of non-conference, is that there's not that signature win that's oh hey, you know what, Morehead State's the 14 seed against West Virginia, but they beat Gonzaga earlier in the year, where you'd be a little bit more confident making that upset pick. I think that's what's kind of, has steered you clear of a whole lot of upsets as well. Clemson versus Rutgers. On the season, Rutgers has really struggled against, the top caliber teams that they've gone up against. 1-7 against the top 25 this season. They were 10.
That one, I think, was Purdue.
Illinois.
Oh, it was Illinois. That's
yeah.
Right. They did beat Purdue, and Purdue ended the season in the top 20.
You forget that I've got it right in front of me right here, so I got all the information.
Well, see, that's why I say it, because I know if I'm wrong, you'll correct me because you have it right there.
That is true.
I'm too lazy. So.
Hey, you know what? I'm with it. I understand it. So I've got Clemson moving on just because Rutgers has really struggled this year against the top talent. And then Houston versus Cleveland State. I've got Houston moving on. Houston absolutely they absolutely shredded Cincinnati in the AAC championship. So I'm going with Houston there. So
Kelvin Sampson. I think Kelvin Sampson's this game's actually going to be played at Assembly Hall.
That's
Kelvin
actually
Sampson back in Assembly Hall.
Yeah, that's actually. Wait, let me see. Yep, it's going to be in Bloomington. Wow, imagine, that's insane.
Does he have to show cause just to walk in the building?
Yeah, he's like, guys, I'm allowed in. I promise. I'm
not here for you. All right, so for me, Illinois moves on from Drexel. I actually do have Georgia Tech over Loyola Chicago. I feel like Georgia Tech's going to ride high in 8-9. Why not? Tennessee over Oregon State. That's an easy one. That's probably one of the big. Lock it. Put that one in Sharpie. I mean, Oregon State stole somebody's bid. Let's just be honest. Oregon State took away probably Louisville's bid. Louisville would have been in had Oregon State done what they were supposed to do and get knocked out of the Pac-12 tournament. Oklahoma State and Liberty. Oklahoma State's got that one. They're a good team. Liberty's good, but man, I mean, Liberty's also a team that struggled against Purdue in the first game of the season, and Purdue was not that good early on. I actually have Syracuse beating San Diego State. I don't know why. I'm just a sucker when it comes time to Syracuse in the tournament, and every year I pick them to advance, and every year they prove me wrong. One of these years I'm actually going to pick against them, and they're actually going to make a run to the Final Four.
That's what they need. They need you to pick against them so they can win a national championship again.
West Virginia, Morehead State. I got West Virginia advancing there. West Virginia, you got to remember, they play some of the best defense in the country every year. I mean, that is a full court press team, and it's hard to beat them. I actually do have Rutgers over Clemson. Both of these teams have struggled at times this year, and I just feel like the grind of the Big Ten is going to ultimately help Rutgers possibly pull this one out. No other reason more so than I needed some upsets, and that seems like one that could happen. And then Houston over Cleveland State. Come on, that's
nope. Cleveland State all the way.
Cleveland State all the way. Yeah, possibly.
They're gonna win. They're gonna go to the Final Four. All right, round of 32. Illinois and Georgia Tech. Again, Georgia Tech. Like, I want to pick some of these like upsets over 1 seeds, and I just like can't bring myself to do it because
that one.
Yeah, especially with that one. I mean, we did just see Georgia Tech go all the way to the ACC championship, so they did something right. But Illinois has just been so.
But that was after Virginia. It was like we got COVID,
right?
We got COVID.
Yeah, that is true. And then also, I mean, Illinois has just been. I mean, we talk about how good we talked about how good Ohio State was, and Illinois just outlasted them basically. So Illinois moves on there. Tennessee versus Oklahoma State in the 5-12. I'm just super enamored with the fact that like half of Oklahoma State's wins this season are against the top 25. I mean, you look, they beat Baylor once, they beat Kansas, they beat Arkansas, they beat Texas, they've beaten Texas Tech twice, they beat Virginia twice, or West Virginia twice, they beat Oklahoma twice. I mean, they just have been amazing all year. When it's mattered against the cream of the crop, they've been there to get the win. West Virginia against San Diego State. I mean, West Virginia on the year, they do have a win over Kansas. They did beat Texas Tech twice and Texas once and Oklahoma State once. Just not besides that UCLA win, and even then it's against the Pac-12. So I know we need to have. I've decided we need to have a podcast where we just like spread the love to the Pac-12. Like, I think we crap on the Pac-12 so much. We need to have like a Pac-12 appreciation segment.
I'll give mine right now. I appreciate the fact that Arizona State has a really good wrestling team.
There you go. I appreciate the fact.
I'm also going to crap on the fact that Stanford, with all the money that Stanford has, decided to cut wrestling after this season.
I mean, Stanford gave us Andrew Luck. Obviously it didn't pan out.
It's hard. I mean, my mama always said, if you ain't got nothing nice to say, don't say nothing nice at all. Well, that's what. Okay, I guess I'm not talking about the Pac-12.
Yeah. So I've got West. West Virginia moving on, over San Diego State. And then we've got Clemson versus Houston. This is a toss-up for me only because, again, it's one of those things where, the AAC is weird. Can we just, just finally admit that I'm sure it's already been, talked about, but the AAC is weird because, it's the remnants of what used to be the Big East. So there's, some of the, shards of that. But also there's just there's some good teams in there, but you don't know really how to are they a mid-major? Are they not? It's kind of like what the Big East is now, where it's you're kind of a mid-major, but you're kind of a Power 5. You're kind of some teams are considered with the big boys, some teams aren't. I'm is Houston on that level? And I think, it's hard to argue when a team is literally in the top 5 in BPI. They've won when they've had to. They got a big win over Texas Tech. They absolutely shredded Cincinnati. So, I thought about maybe going with the upset here and picking Clemson to win, but I do have Houston moving on. So, again, have I had all, 4 regions go 1, 2, 3, 4? I think I might have, actually.
Pretty sure, yeah.
Yeah, at this point. So, yeah, I'm pretty sure I have. Yep, 1, 2, 3, 4 across the board. So I'm sure there's going to be some wrongness in there somewhere. But
I guarantee there's going to be some wrongness, but it's hard to pick it this year.
Yeah.
Usually you're I can see that happening. I can see that happening. But this year it's just yeesh.
Yeah, it's tough.
All right. I got Illinois over Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech's run and Illinois is on a different level. The 4-5 matchup of Tennessee and Oklahoma State. I have Tennessee winning this one, mostly because the trust of the Big 12. There's some teams in the Big 12 you can trust, and there's others that you can't. And Oklahoma State, it seems to be one of those in the past. And I just feel like Tennessee is always there, as of late. Are they not? Are they not consistent in the Sweet 16? So they're either in the tournament, either they're not in the tournament, or they make the Sweet 16. It's just kind of one of those consistents. I have West Virginia over Syracuse. Again, like I said, West Virginia plays that full court press, and it's really tough. Rutgers runs into a wall here. Houston advances on to face West Virginia in the Sweet 16.
All right. So, well, first of all, we've got Dusty in the chat. He's not happy that you're picking the Vols to move on, but hey, I mean they've been strong.
I mean, it's one of those that I can't advance every higher seed.
Yeah.
So some of them some of them are such toss-ups that I was like, you just have to guess on some of them.
Yeah.
And that's one of them right there.
All right. So, I mean, yeah, there's going to also be, there's going to be one region where it's just, off the wall.
It's going to be pure chaos in some of these regions.
And the question is that going to be this region for me? Because, like I said, I mean, I try not to get caught up on, one stat. But, I mean, Oklahoma State's just done it all this year. And, going up against... I mean, the Big 12 isn't as good as the Big 10, but, I mean, going up against an Illinois team, I mean, you got Oklahoma State losing to Tennessee, so, I mean, I guess you're not the one to talk to on that. But, I just think that, as much as I want to go Oklahoma State, Illinois has just been so, strong all year. They just come off winning the Big 10. They're a team, you know what? Also, they're a team that lived up to my Big Ten championship prediction. So, I guess I can't be super out on them, especially in the Sweet 16. So, I've got Illinois moving on. And then, again, just to be a little bit different, I've got West Virginia beating Houston. I think that's where the road ends for Houston. I think even though, Houston's really good, they've not played a lot of tournament caliber teams this year. And I think, West Virginia is a little bit more battle tested. A little bit just, even though when West Virginia has been tested, they've not always passed, but at the same time, I think they've just played more, a tougher schedule. They're, I think, a little bit, more ready to go into that grind of the tournament. So I've got West Virginia moving on. So Illinois and West Virginia in the Midwest final.
Yeah, I have Illinois advancing on to the Elite Eight. I've said it enough. Illinois they're really good. And then I do have West Virginia beating Houston as well. I get that full court press. Houston, they haven't faced competition like West Virginia. They haven't faced competition like West Virginia has. So, I've got West Virginia moving on to the Elite Eight to face Illinois.
All right, so in the Elite Eight, the Midwest final, Illinois versus West Virginia, and I mentioned it a second ago. West Virginia is battle-tested, but when they've been in those tests, they have failed more often than not. And that's where I think the road ends for West Virginia. They make it all the way to the Elite Eight, but falter to Illinois. Illinois advances, and they will head on to face Baylor in the Final Four.
You know what? I originally had West Virginia beating Illinois. But Illinois this is going to be a battle. I'll say that. This is going to be one of those games that this is going to be a must watch. This could go into overtime and just be a slugfest. But I'm going to go with Illinois ultimately when I look at this. The way Illinois has been playing as of late is insane. And they're going to be a very, 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 very tough team to beat. So if they can continue that type of play on, there's no reason to think they're not a Final Four team. And the reason I think I also picked originally West Virginia over Illinois is because I was like, I have all 1 seeds in the Final Four. That can't be. That can't be right.
No.
But, man, the gut test just says Illinois. It's got to be Illinois.
Yeah, I mean, Illinois has just been so good all season. So, my Final Four, kind of recapping here, I've got Gonzaga, Florida State, Baylor, and Illinois in my Final Four. So 3 1 seeds. Again, it's just so tough to. It's not that the tournament isn't deep. It's just, again, there's not besides conference only play, there's not much of a litmus test outside of that to be like, oh hey, against in the non-conference, so against tournament teams that weren't in their own conference, because I mean conference play is a different level. I mean they're teams that you have a little bit more drive to beat a team in your conference. You could be literally 0-14 in the non-conference and get up and play 500 in your conference because you just want to go out and beat people.
Is different between conference as well.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not going to have to see Bo Borowski in the NCAA tournament, most likely, because the Big Ten thinks he's a great official, but the rest of the country is like, no, Bo's biased. Let's be honest. Bo is a biased official.
So in the Final Four, I've got on the left side of the bracket, we'll go back there, I've got Gonzaga versus Florida State. And I've got Gonzaga winning this game. Again, it's just hard to argue. I mean, because, again, kind of goes against what I just said. But, I mean, obviously number 1 overall seed, undefeated. But, they've gone outside their conference schedule this year against some really good opponents. And they've gone out and beaten them. And they've beaten them relatively soundly. Whereas on the other side, Florida State, within the ACC, a little bit beaten up. They've played well. They're a good team. But I just think Gonzaga is just that much better. So I have Gonzaga advancing to the championship game on April 5th. On the other side, on the right side of the bracket, I've got Illinois versus Baylor. And this is where Illinois earlier in the year lost by 13 to Baylor. And I just think, Baylor this season, a Big 12 team, not super confident in what they can do. They're 22-2, but, they're 500 against Kansas. They've lost a game against, they lost a game against Oklahoma State earlier in the year, who's been really good. So I'm going to go with Illinois to beat Baylor and get that win, advance to the national championship game. So I've got a national championship game of Gonzaga and Illinois.
So my Final Four is Gonzaga in Michigan and Baylor in Illinois. Gonzaga versus Michigan. I actually got Michigan winning that game. I think the physicality of Michigan is going to be a bit much for Gonzaga to handle. I could be totally wrong. Michigan, I mean, obviously I could be totally wrong with all this. I probably am. But I'm going with Michigan. I honestly, I don't know too much about Gonzaga other than they're undefeated, number 1 overall seed. I don't stay up till midnight to watch their games.
Why not?
And besides, they run roughshod in their conference, and it's kind of boring to watch. So, yes, I have Michigan over Gonzaga. And then Baylor versus Illinois. This is a tough one. This is 2 very identical teams. But we have seen Illinois have a tendency to trip up in games, in big games. And they have done that a couple times, whereas Baylor, not so much. Baylor's been consistent all year long. So I have Baylor advancing on to face Michigan in the national championship game.
All right, so it's kind of funny that you bring up that point about, tripping up, because I've, by that definition, I've got 2 teams in the national championship game in Illinois and Gonzaga who have notoriously tripped up when it comes to, Gonzaga come tournament time, seems to always have, a strong regular season, get in as a high seed, and then somewhere along the line, whether it's, in the first round or the Sweet 16 or the Elite 8 national championship game, they just always seem to come up a little bit short. On the other side, you said, you made that same point against Illinois, and you're not wrong. So I think the most Gonzaga thing of all time would be to be going into the national championship game undefeated, have a chance, almost want to pick for them to win just because they'd be undefeated and they'd be the first team since IU, and we'll bring it all full circle to go undefeated. And that would just be really hilarious that IU couldn't even claim that anymore. But I think the most Gonzaga thing of all time would be for them to make it to the national championship game, be undefeated, have an opportunity to be the first undefeated team, in 40 years. And then I think they lose to Illinois. So I've got Illinois winning this game 87-82. I just think, again, it's one of those things, and it's kind of similar to the point that you made earlier too, where they run roughshod in their conference, and yes, they've got a lot of big wins against. I've made that my reasoning for picking them to move on, is that they have been able to play those top teams and be successful. But as you get further on in the tournament, I mean, it just gets tougher and tougher. The pressure gets more and more increased. It's one thing to go out and beat Iowa by 11, Kansas by 12, Virginia by 23 in the regular season when there's not as much pressure. And obviously, I mean, they know how to handle the pressure. They've made deep tournament runs before, but always when it comes to finally executing that, finishing it off and having that, final great ending, they just always seem to come up a little bit short, and I think that's what happens against Illinois. So I've got Illinois as my national champion. They win 87-82 over Gonzaga. The reason why I'm telling you the score is because I just had to input it into the ESPN bracket challenge. So that's going to be my selection there. Illinois beats Gonzaga in the national championship game, cuts down the nets in Lucas Oil, Fighting Illini.
Again. Second time this season they would do that.
Yeah, true. Very true. So Illinois is my national champion.
I like that pick. I don't, that pick could easily be. My national championship game, I have Michigan against Baylor. I'm going with Baylor. Baylor, in my opinion, is clearly the more talented team. Michigan they're a solid team. They're really good. But they're also playing above expectations for them, which I think the expectations may have been a little bit too low. But I don't think they're too deep of a team. Once you get past Hunter Dickinson, the center position becomes a little questionable for them. And I think Baylor's size and athleticism is going to be a tough situation for a freshman in Hunter Dickinson to overcome. So I have Baylor winning the national championship. I don't have a score because the program I used did not require me to input a score.
It's going to be 0-0, 2-0 Baylor over.
Michigan's going to get COVID and Baylor's going to win the national championship.
Oh my God. Could you imagine? I don't even want to think about that.
The way things are going, it could happen.
Yeah.
The way things are going, Purdue can make a run to the Final Four because teams in front of them caught COVID.
Yeah, because that's the thing, too. We talk about, oh, man, it's so tough to make all these picks because these teams are so good. Heck, because I would have thought, maybe I'm a little naive. I would have thought that, and I mean, I guess I don't mean this in, a harsh way, but, I'm really surprised that we're this deep into, the NCAA season. We're, obviously getting ready to start the NCAA tournament, and there's high-profile teams still getting him. I mean, obviously, it's, up to chance, whatever, exactly. But it's just...
You brought that up a few weeks ago, and I said, there's no way that's going to happen. No chance. But, I mean, seriously, if Virginia, one of the most disciplined teams out there, in my opinion, can come down with it in a bubble...
Yeah.
Oh, man. Anything can happen, to be honest. Anything. Right. So, I mean, am I all that surprised it happened to Duke?
No.
No. Am I all that surprised that it happened to Kansas? No. But a team like Tony Bennett, that's a very well-run, disciplined team. You just don't see issues with them. And for that to happen, wow.
Yeah. Well, that will do it for our bracket special. Let us know what your picks are because we are going to be putting out a bracket challenge, so be on the lookout for that on our Facebook page, Crash Course Podcast, as well as our Twitter handle as well, at Crash Course FM. So make sure you're on the lookout for that. And then also remember the MCT Podcast boys are going to be doing their bracket special as well. We're going to release that a little later in the day on Tuesday, so they'll have their picks. We're kind of having a inter-podcast battle, so we're going up against them to see who's got the better brackets between the two of us, so we'll see how that pans out. You can catch that at 3C Media, which is the new name on the YouTube channel, so go over there, hit that subscribe button, ring the bell so you don't miss an upload, because those guys are I feel like they want to upload every day of the week, which I'm not against. But I'm just like, man, you guys are just going after it. They've been kicking butt, and I love it. And then remember, you can follow us on Twitch, 3C Media on Twitch, where we record live every week. And then remember, you can listen to Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever podcasts can be heard. You can hear the Crash Course Podcast. B. Scott, where can they find you?
You can always find me on Twitter at Brandon_Scott87.
Next week, we will be talking about, no doubt some of these, the big things that have happened in the first weekend of the NCAA tournament. It's going to be a lot of fun. Make sure you're locked into that. We'll be back next week. But until then, have a good one, everybody.